So let me begin with a question for Dr. Zweerink, and that is, what were the circumstances that brought you to your current belief in the existence of God? Who or what most influenced your thinking?
So I am a Christian, and my basic worldview is that Christianity and the Bible answers those basic questions the best. I think that's probably the biggest difference between Michael and myself. Two of the seminal events I remember early in my childhood were seeing my parents be baptized. They had recently become Christians. Their Christianity permeated our home. I was taught Christianity. I had these two trusted sources teaching me Christianity, so I've accepted Christianity. As I got older, I began to investigate and ask the question whether it's true. So I'm not a Christian because my parents taught me Christianity. I'm a Christian at this point in time because I'm convinced it's true. And I also, my dad was a PhD chemist, and I have a fascination for science. The other memory was watching my brother, or a demonstration that my dad was doing for my brother, liquid nitrogen, ball and liquid nitrogen, throw it on the wall, it shatters. I was 3 years old and I remember it. Just fascinated with the way the world works. And why I am at the position I am is that I think science is about the truth of how this world works, and Christianity is about the truth of how this world works. And in my investigations, I am convinced that they work well together, that Bible's basic message that God created the universe, He created humanity to be in relationship with Him. We've rebelled against that. That rebellion led to our separation, a severed relationship, that we're created to be in subjection to God, submission to God. Christ's life, death, and resurrection atone for that for all who want to be in submission to God, and that ultimately we are going to be either those who have chosen to follow Christ are going to be with God in heaven, those who are not are going to be separated from God, and that's the definition of hell. So I think that's why part of why I think this discussion is important is because there are big implications for where we go from here. One point I would like to say, and why I'm excited about this dialogue and not a debate, is that I had a speaking coach come to our organization a little while ago, and he presented a very startling statistic. He said, when people hear a presentation, here's the percentages of what they listen to. That of the 100%, 60% of what your response is based on how the person looks. Now, we're sitting down. I'm a little bit taller than Michael. Michael's better looking than me. So, we kind of maybe a wash there. 30% is how well you say it. And 7% is what you actually said. And I found that an incredibly discouraging statistic. But and if you notice what I did here is I'm saying things well, to kind of illustrate the point. What I want to offer and what I'm going to challenge tonight is, we may say things well, we may say things poorly, but ultimately we're articulating ideas. I want to articulate my ideas well, and I want Michael to articulate his ideas well, so that you can go out and investigate and say, which of these are actually true? Because if you believe it because I said it, or if you believe it because Michael said it, that's kind of a poor foundation. Go out and investigate what's true and align your life with that. And so I'm excited about our dialogue just to see what's going to come out of it.
How tall are you?
6'4".
Oh.
Got you by an inch or two, I think.
Oh. So. Man, I would love to be 6 foot something.
I have to say I've enjoyed it.
I found in high school, though, that girls also like guys that are smart. So that led me to go into books. And they like guys that wear nice shoes. So anyway. I'm told this is true. I have the data on this anyway. I'm from the People's Republic of California, and where I was born and raised. And my parents were not religious. They were not anything, just secularist or whatever. I think they really hadn't given much thought to it beyond dropping me off at the local Presbyterian church periodically when I was a child. Then I became a born-again Christian in high school, 1971. As part of the kind of nascent evangelical Jesus movement, which I did for about 7 years, fairly seriously. I read the Bible and went to Bible classes and things like that. These were non-denominational, just sort of gatherings. This was the 70s, guys with guitars and gold chains and long hair and sandals, that kind of thing. But then I went to Pepperdine in Malibu at Church of Christ, and I took classes in the Old Testament, the New Testament, the life of Jesus, the writings of C.S. Lewis, and all that. So I was totally into it. And then, you know, after about 7 years or so, I would say I gave it up while in graduate school, toward the end of graduate school, at a secular university, just getting a graduate degree, where no one was religious, or they were, and it didn't come up. It was just not relevant to the science we were doing, experimental psychology. And, you know, several things came up with that. The problem of evil was a big one for me, personally, but also intellectually, it just seemed like a problem. My college sweetheart was in a car accident and broke her back and was paralyzed for life, still paralyzed. And I remember just thinking, why does this happen? I mean, if there's an all-powerful, all-good God that could have made the car go this way instead of that way or whatever, why didn't he do that? And it wasn't a big test, really, like, this is it. If he doesn't heal my sweetheart, then I'm out. It was just kind of like, that was sort of the final straw. The intellectual journey was taking classes in psychology, social psychology, sociology, anthropology, comparative world religions, mythology. I went through my Joseph Campbell stage and just realized, well, you know, there's billions of people around the world that think differently than me. What are the chances I got the right one and all these other people are wrong? You know, maybe the Copernican principle that we're not special applies to myself. Maybe I'm not special. Maybe it's a different kind of truth. Maybe they believe what they believe. We believe what we believe as Christians in the West. And neither one of them is exactly right, because this is a different kind of truth. So this is an idea I'm exploring in my next book called Truth, which we can get into later, about what do we mean by these words, truth. But anyway, so long story short, I went on to become a college professor, and then got into publishing Skeptic magazine, which is my day job. And so we investigate all kinds of topical issues. God and religion comes up a lot, but other political issues, trans, abortion, nationalism, you know, just medicine, just all kinds of claims that can be investigated through the tools of science and reason, and that's kind of my thing.
Thank you. Yes.
6'4". God darn.
I have to say I've enjoyed being 6'4" most of my life. So.
Yeah.
There's little justice. All right, Dr. Shermer, what would you consider to be the strongest argument or arguments for your position?
On what subject?
Well, your skepticism.
You listed seven really important subjects.
Well, let's just talk about your skepticism of when it comes to belief in God.
Okay. So here's how I think about it. So you mentioned there's two positions. Well, there's more than that. First of all, there's theists. So Jeff's a theist. He believes in God. But there's not just one kind of atheist. There's strong atheists, those who believe there is no God. And then weak atheists, closer to my position, that just lack a belief in God. I can't prove there's no God. But that's different from just saying, you've made a claim, I don't accept it. I just think the evidence is not that good, so I just don't accept it. And you can apply that to any claim. And try to convince me, and if you don't, then I don't believe. That's different from saying, I know you're wrong. So that's the weak case. Then agnostic is another position that's reasonable. So you make a distinction between ontology and epistemology. Ontology, the nature of reality. Epistemology, how we know what reality is, how we know anything. And so that term, agnostic, was coined in 1869 by Thomas Henry Huxley, a friend of Charles Darwin, who looked around the landscape and said, you know, there's these people that are sure they're right and these other people that are sure they're wrong. But there's this other position where we just don't know. And it's not just that I don't know right now, and I'm going to collect some more evidence. We'll see how it goes. Maybe I'll change my mind, maybe not. What Huxley meant was it's not knowable. There's some things we just can't know, and God may be one of those. So my current position is something of both of those. Pragmatically speaking, I assume there's no God. I don't think there is. I would be surprised, hopefully pleasantly surprised, if I go in the right direction. I know you, so maybe, you know, it'll help.
I don't think that's going to help you. So that's not my ballywick there.
But what would it mean to know there's a God? Now, I don't mean emotionally. I understand the personal experience as a way of reasoning toward believing something. I had this incredible experience, this happened at 3 in the morning, whatever, and that changed my life. I get that. But that's not an argument to convince you that you should believe, because you didn't have that experience. So I just think there are a number of deep issues, some of which you've touched on: the nature of consciousness, what it's like to be something, free will and determinism, God's existence. In the afterlife, I'd say those are not only unknown, they may be unknowable, at least the way we've constructed the arguments, the words we use, the concepts that we have at the moment, and the way we talk about them may not be a way to get at it where, like, most of us in this room would agree X is true. If you just take some other subject that's not controversial, like, I don't know, I don't want to get too political. Okay, let's just, just something like UFOs. Are we being visited by aliens or not? Well, it's either we are or we're not. And presumably we could get to some conclusion about this if we could just see the evidence and so on, and most of us would agree. I'm not sure the God question is in that realm, because there's a lot of people that believe very differently than Christians do. In fact, billions don't believe what Christians believe. Are they all wrong? I mean, are you willing to go that far to say, I'm so confident that I'm right and they're wrong? They know what you know. I mean, I know what you know. I've read all that. So I used to believe this. And I don't think you know what you think you know, because if you did, I would believe. So I don't think the arguments are as good as you think that they are. If you just use a slightly different version of this on the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. You know, I've debated theists on this, Christians on this. You know, they have their line of arguments. Here's our evidence, and so on and so forth. The empty tomb, and the women were there, and Thomas, and so on. Why don't Jews believe this? You can't say, well, they don't understand the arguments. I mean, if they just saw the arguments, they've read this book, they'd become Christians. No, they know the arguments. I know, because I've talked to them. These rabbis are smart cookies. They've read all this stuff. They don't believe for a different reason. It isn't going to hinge on the arguments or evidence. It hinges on something else. Last point. How many of you here would call yourself Christians and believe in God? Oh, okay. Look at the time. All right. If at the end of the evening you were reasonably convinced that I had better arguments that God doesn't exist, would you abandon your Christianity? Right. One would. I got one. I got two. Okay. Three. All right. Oh, okay. Four. Okay. But most people, so this is my point. You don't believe because of the arguments. That's not what this is about. Reasons to believe, I think, as an organization, if you're already a Christian, if you already believe, here are a bunch of really good reasons to bolster that. Okay, good. But that isn't how to get there in the first place. I contend that people get there through other means and then back into it. Here's the reasons I believe this. This isn't true just for religion. It's true for political positions and economic ideologies and so on. But anyway, that's a different one. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So your position is that the strongest argument is that, frankly, it is ultimately unknowable.
Yeah.
Okay. And Dr. Zweerink, what do you consider to be the strongest argument or arguments for your position?
Well, and I would just like to piggyback. I actually largely agree with the last statement you made there, that I don't think this is primarily, the decision we make about that is not primarily rational based on reason. There is a component of that, but I don't think that's the final answer, because, you know, that's one of the questions I have here. You know, I'm going to ask you is, like, you and I largely see the same evidence. If it's the same evidence, are one of us just being irrational or not, or is there something else going on there? So I think that'd be a great question to explore. But my position, again, is that the Bible is a good descriptor or an accurate description of the way the world works. And two things that I think stand out about that are related to reason and rationality is that when you look at specifically the Genesis creation account, Genesis 1, Genesis 2, when you ask the question, what's going on there, a couple of things stand out. One is that when you consider who the author was, and I'm going to say Moses, and I realize there's a, you know, he's compiling things. It's a more complicated, but just for an easy thing, whoever the author of Genesis was, the audience he was speaking to had an incredibly different worldview than what Moses was saying. This was, I mean, you just look at his audience as it goes on. They are repeatedly steeped in pagan worship, all sorts of things that are just very different than what's going on there. And a fellow that I was listening to, he said it so well, it's like, when you look at who Moses' original audience was, and what Moses was writing, and what we believe today, what's fascinating is that Moses was so good at contextualizing what he's saying that we think more like Moses than his original audience did. When you read the Genesis creation account, it's like, this is the way it started, and then this happened, and then this happened, and this is the account. It's the way we talk about things when we're describing things. That's very different than the audience he was talking to. That the Genesis creation account transformed how we think about these things, that especially in the West, which I think is dominantly a Christian influence, that's the way we think about things. And it's that sort of way of thinking about things that leads to the scientific enterprise, or at least makes the scientific enterprise a doable thing, because the world needs to work a particular way for science to work. The other strong piece of evidence that I think is strong and compelling is that when you look at what the Bible describes, again, there's a beginning to creation, that there is design and there is purpose in there. And as we've studied the universe, we find, I think you could make an argument with scientists almost kind of dragged to the positions kicking and screaming that it looks like the universe does indeed have a beginning. Now, we don't have a final answer to that, because to get to the final answer, we need to have a quantum theory of gravity, and we don't. There's a whole lot of detail that is around in there. But when you look at the history of the 20th and 21st centuries, you find this repeated pattern of scientists saying, well, here's a way where you don't have a beginning. And then as we further investigate, it's like, now you still have a beginning. It's like the universe keeps pushing us back to the idea that there's a beginning. That's not a tangential statement of the way the Bible describes the world. That's kind of a foundational way of the way the Bible describes the world. And we see that the universe kind of seems designed for life. And again, that's a fun discussion to have, that it's not like I can just say, well, here, we can quantify it and it's provable that it's designed. But there's a lot of things that looks like this universe has a design and a purpose to it. And that's kind of what we see as we're looking, that there's this alignment between what I would argue the Bible is describing as true, and as we've looked at the scientific record, we find evidence that, yeah, that's the way the world works. And I think those are the two of the strongest pieces of evidence that I would point to. Okay.
And let me follow up with you. What would you consider to be the strongest argument contrary to Dr. Shermer's position?
So two things that are kind of related to this is, you kind of made a point that there's billions of people who don't think Christianity is true. And so how likely is it that we've gotten the right answer? When you look through the history of the world, there are billions of people that think that there is something beyond this physical world. And kind of a similar response, why would we think that just recently we finally figured out that that's not the way things are? I think your position may be a little more nuanced than that in there. I'd be curious to know your thoughts to it. And the other part is, mind blank there, that if this world is all that there is, there are these things, again, that most people think, that there is purpose, that there is justice, there is a reason why things are here. And I remember hearing a very prominent Christian speaker describe how he'd won a tennis tournament when he was in high school, and this was kind of a pinnacle of success, and he came back a number of years later and that trophy was thrown in the trash can. And his statement was, time destroys all accomplishments. That if your worldview is correct, give it 1 billion years, and there's nothing we do has actually made a lick's worth of difference, because all of it's going to be gone. That doesn't seem to align with the way the vast majority of the world lives, that there is a purpose, a function. That all has to be, it seems like if materialism is all there is, that idea of purpose and design, or purpose and meaning, is an illusion at best. And yet that's the way the vast majority of people in the world live.
Dr. Shermer,
okay.
What do you consider to be the strongest arguments against Dr. Zweerink's.
Yeah, okay, I'll say two things on what he just described there. First of all, I think about how we know what is true or not in kind of a spectrum or scale between, say, 0 and 1, some probabilities. So this is what's called Bayesian reasoning, where you assign a probability of something being true based on your prior knowledge of the evidence for it. And when the evidence changes, you adjust your credence or confidence that the claim is true when the new evidence comes in, and so on. And it's always constantly, think of it, instead of a light switch where, you know, the truth is on or it's off, think of it as a rheostat where it's coming up, it's going down, depending on the constantly changing evidence. In Bayesian reasoning, there's something called Cromwell's rule. Oliver Cromwell, the great English politician, famously said, "I beseech you in the bowels of Christ, you might be mistaken." In Bayesian reasoning, Cromwell's rule is never assign a 0 or a 1 to anything, because you don't know for sure. And the reason we don't know for sure, I assume when we're talking about God, we agree we're talking about a non-corporeal being or agent who is omniscient, omnipotent, omnibenevolent, created the universe out of nothing, and so on. This is what we're talking about here. Well, I don't know if this deity exists or not, but I know one thing for sure. I'm not God. And I know another thing for sure. You're not either. So I don't know.
Some might disagree with you. No, I agree with you. Yes.
So I don't know for sure, and you don't either. I know you don't. So let's just say we can take off the table the kind of tension of, ooh, I got to be right. Just say, well, I might be right. I might be wrong. You know, here's why I think what I think, but I'll change my mind. Show me what you got. That takes a little of the pressure off. A little bit like having a dialogue instead of a debate. I don't have to come here to win. I'm just gonna tell you what I think, and you'll take that as you will. Okay, so with Cromwell's rule in place and saying, okay, so we have these difficult problems to solve. What is the origins of the universe? Well, okay, we've been pushing back and back and back, further and further toward the Big Bang, but we're not there yet. We don't know, you know, within milliseconds of the bang, inflationary cosmology and all that, what happened just before that, or what banged the bang, or where the stuff that came from banged. Excuse me. Or there might be multiple bubble universes. This might be a creation, not the creation. There may be an eternity of these, or maybe not eternity. Maybe it just goes back 10 universes or something. We just don't know. We have no idea. Nobody knows. And so a lot of times when I hit these epistemological walls where we just don't know, I just say, let's just wait and see. I don't have to commit to anything. Just say, we don't know. And, you know, maybe the God answer is an answer, maybe. But it seems reasonable to ask, well, where did God come from? Who created God? And so on. You say, well, but God is that which does not need to be created. All right. These are just words. You're just using words. Why can't the universe or the multiverse be that which does not need to be created? You know, we're just using words here to describe some conundrum we can't figure out. And so there, the fine tuning, we can get into the details of that if you want. But basically, we're kind of forcing into the conversation an answer. God did it, but it's not a very good explanation, because it doesn't explain anything. It's like if I see Penn and Teller do the double bullet catch in the Vegas show. It's the most amazing magic trick. And I said, how did they do it? And you go, well, they used magic. I said, I know they used magic. I want to know how they did it, right? Saying they used magic is not an explanation. It's not a very good explanation. You know, to say, well, where did morality come from? Where did consciousness come from? Where did the universe come? God did it is not a very good explanation. It doesn't take us anywhere. How did God do it? You know, so that now there are theistic evolutionists who argue that all of the laws of nature we study in science is the way God did it. God used evolutionary theory and natural selection and kin selection and reciprocal altruism to give us morality and so on and so forth. And basically, they write stuff that I write. And the only difference is they are adding just one extra step there. Well, if God is behind the whole thing. He kind of prepackaged or front-loaded into the laws of nature some kind of teleology in which there's a directionality to it that gives rise to morality and consciousness in us and so on. Maybe. But at some point, we're just back to where, nobody knows what's before that. So why even go there? All right. Now, if you want to go there for some other reasons, emotionally, psychologically, or whatever, okay, but that's different. Okay, second point on the purpose. A billion years from now, the trophy's in the trash. A billion years from now, the trophy was just going to be atoms scattered somewhere else in the solar system, probably. But this is what I call Alvey's error. So Alvey Singer is Woody Allen's character in Annie Hall. And recall from the movie, Alvey has a flashback to when he was a child. And he won't do his homework. And his mother takes him to the psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist, Alvey, why won't you do your homework? And he says, the universe is expanding. What's the universe got to do with it? Well, in billions of years from now, the whole universe is going to blow up, so none of us, what we do matters, so I don't have to do my homework. And his mother upbraids him and says, what's the universe got to do with it? We live in Brooklyn. Brooklyn is not expanding. So I call this Alvey's error, this one of my Scientific American columns, that it's the wrong scale. And I got this from watching William Lane Craig do a debate in which he said, if there's no afterlife and there's no God, then Hitler got away with it. It doesn't matter what the Nazis did to the Jews. He actually said this. It doesn't matter what happened to the Jews. It doesn't matter. It matters to them. It matters now. Whether there's an afterlife or not is irrelevant. We want justice now. We've got to make the world better now. We live in the here and now, not the hereafter, which may or may not exist. If it does, okay, but who cares? What difference does it make? Now is how you should live your life. Have better relationships, make the world a better place, and so on. Anyway.
So what would it take to convince you beyond a certain point that you're wrong?
A large cash deposit in a Swiss bank account, $100,000 small bills.
So if we proceeded to take up a collection.
So I can buy your way into being a Christian?
Yeah. No. No. Yes. Well, okay,
Evidence,
Jeff. That's it's a hard problem because if you talk about God's existence, what would it take? That is a hard one because I'm really not sure it's a knowable thing in a kind of a scientific way. This is what I mean by agnostic in the kind of ontological or epistemological sense. Let me give you just a fun thought experiment. Let's say we encounter extraterrestrial intelligences somewhere out there. They're not in New Mexico in Area 51. They're just out there somewhere. And we know for sure that the way evolution and technology works, they're not going to be like us. They're not going to be bipedal primates that speak in a weird accent and do weird things to people and their probes. It's going to be like that. They're going to be something completely different from us. And they're not going to be just like 5 years ahead of us, like the Roswell UFO people think. We're back engineered silicon technology to make the computers, and they were just 5 years ahead. They're going to be hundreds of thousands, millions of years ahead of us. They won't be behind us because they won't come here because we just achieved space travel, right? So look at what we've accomplished in just a century of science and technology. Extend that out to 100 centuries or 1,000 centuries or 1,000,000 centuries and what they could possibly do or what we might be able to do in the far future if we continue. Just take Moore's law of the doubling computing powers every 18 months down to 12 months now and just extrapolate that out for 50,000 years. What kind of just take an Elon Musk trajectory of progress in any of the technologies he's building, 50,000 years of that. And they would be almost deified, like they would be like gods. It'd be like us showing up 100,000 years ago to Neanderthals and go, look at this. It'd be like, I'm not worthy, right? I mean, so if you said, well, if you showed me a being that was capable of genetic engineering, creating life, we can almost do that. I mean, the Human Genome Project and its derivatives, we can almost create genomes ourselves now in cells. What about geoengineering planets? We're going to be doing this. Elon's got a whole plan about how we're going to geoengineer Mars and terraform it into Earth. You could do this in about 1,000 years. We're going to do this. And we only have like a couple centuries of cool science and technology. What if we had 100,000 centuries to do this, right? We would be deified. So I'm not sure, if you showed me, look at this being, here is God, and it can do all this cool stuff. How would I know it's what you mean by God, or it's just this far future, super intelligent alien or something like that? I know it's a little quirky thought experiment, but just let that sit for a minute.
Not to be obnoxious, but does that mean there was nothing that would convince you?
I think so. Short of maybe a personal experience, maybe.
Okay.
But, you know, if you want to get into that, I mean, some of my friends are trying to get me to do ayahuasca. So I can see that there really is this other reality in which there's ayahuasca.
What's that?
Okay, it's this plant derivative that shamans in South America.
Okay. I thought it was some organization.
No, it's it's a hallucinogen.
I'm with you now. Okay.
But it's an interesting problem for how you know something, right? Because I'm a materialist monist. I don't think there's another dimension world that your mind goes off into under the ayahuasca thing, and you see the spirit beings and the animals and all the stuff that people describe. But most people that do ayahuasca or any of the other hallucinogens swear that this is the doors, opening the doors of perception to this other dimension. Not everybody, but most people do. So let's say I, the materialist, take the ayahuasca and I come back, oh my God, you're not going to believe it. I was wrong. And there is this other world. And you go, all right, show it to us, Shermer. And I go, well, here, take the ayahuasca and you'll see it yourself, right? It's still in the head. Mm-hmm. Okay. What we want is, for objective truth, is it's not just me. You can see it too. Here, we'll point to it. Here's the data. You can see it, and we can agree or not. Yeah.
Well, that was actually going to be the topic of our next discussion of our next forum. Yes.
Okay.
Ayahuasca?
Yes, yes. Did you not get
I'll have to come back for
you
that
didn't
one,
get the emails?
I did not get the emails about that.
So, Dr. Zweerink, what would it take to convince you that your beliefs in God are totally erroneous, figments of your fevered imagination?
So there's two parts of that. One, I have thought about, it's like, okay, what would it take to show me that Christianity is wrong? And I think at the end of the day, it is something that the Bible says that is demonstrably false, because I believe that's God's revelation of himself to us. And if he's revealed himself, or this revelation contains falsehood, something demonstrably false, and I would say probably the biggest candidate for that would be the resurrection, because that is ultimately the thing that Christianity hinges on. If there's a single thing that it hinges on, is that Christ was raised from the dead. So I can definitively say that. The challenge is, I could ask the same question: what would it take to convince me that Big Bang cosmology is wrong? There's not just one piece of evidence you could bring into that, because there's this wealth of evidence that's supporting that. So that one piece of evidence would have to be considered in the context of all the evidence that I see as evidence for Big Bang cosmology. And so there is a history of, I've asked the question, I love the way you said it, it's like, what if I'm wrong here? What if God doesn't exist? What if the Bible's wrong? And I've wrestled with those, and there's just been enough times where as I've wrestled with, is that correct? It's like, well, there are a lot of people who've thought about this, and it really does make sense. And as I listen and read their arguments for and against, I know oftentimes in various areas, I know the arguments against my position as well as the arguments for it. And at the end of the day, I look at it and it's like, well, it's still that the evidence seems to stack up over here. So it's not so, $100,000 in the bank account. I wouldn't bat an eye at that if you want to do that. But I don't think there's a single piece of evidence, because that evidence has to be considered into the body of evidence that's already there as well. So.
Okay. All right. Well, next, can I ask you, what are the implications of your worldview in terms of how you live your life?
That's a great question, because, originally when I was thinking about, does God exist? I've listened to enough of your debates on that, that's, you can get into. The idea of does God exist or not is somewhat not the right question. It's like, I think God exists, I think it's the God of Bible, and therefore it means this. And I think if I'm correct, there's you don't think God exists, and therefore that means this. And so it's the what is this? Well, it's like look at Christianity, and I think I want people to know Christianity. I want people to want Christianity to be true because I think it solves the problems that Michael's elucidating, that there's disease, there's famine, there's injustice, there's the well-being of people is not as good as it could be. And I think why I think Christianity is right is because it provides a genuine solution to that, and that the solution is not that we need to know and understand more, because information is not the problem. The problem is whether we choose to submit to the way God has created us. We talk a lot about identity in today's society. As a Christian, I would argue that God has created us to be identified in Him, that our proper place where we thrive and flourish is in submission to His will and His plan and why He's created, and that is where all the blessings of Christianity flow, living eternally with Him in the afterlife, and also it works out better for life here as well. So just in terms of what works better for life here, I think Christianity is the best solution to the problems that I think we would probably agree are the problems that we're facing and that we would want to solve.
And Dr. Shermer, what are the implications of your worldview in terms of how you live your life?
Yeah, I would say these are important decisions to make. Like Pascal's wager, what have you got to lose? Well, plenty. I mean, I could spend my Sunday mornings doing something else than going to church. I'm kind of half joking.
You certainly get the early football games if you don't have to go to church. So.
I mean, the commitment, the proper, real, true commitment to a religion does require some effort and truly believing in it, and that's not cost-free. What if you got the wrong one? I mean, that there's 1.8 billion Muslims who are as confident as you are that you're wrong and you're going to the other place. They really believe it, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting before this, I had 2 podcast guests in the last week that I just recorded. One was a Muslim imam who wrote a new book about the Quran, and another one, well, I'll tell you about that. So he just went on rapturously about this is the most amazing book ever written. And he proceeded to tell me why he thought it was so. And it's like, okay, I can see that. I don't get it. I've tried to read it. It's not my thing. And then I had another guest who wrote a book about, well, the book is called Purpose. It's about how to derive purpose and meaning from nature, science, evolutionary theory, human nature, and so on. The kind of book I would write. In fact, I have written much of what he wrote. But he's a Mormon. Like chapter 3 goes, by the way, I'm a Mormon. I went, what? Okay, all right. How does this fit? So I, push him on that. You're a Mormon. Okay. Why? Well, have you read the Book of Mormon? I said, well, I saw the play. Oh my God, it's hilarious. No, I don't mean that. Yeah, he goes, this is the most amazing book I've ever read. I mean, it could not have been written by a human. It could not. It had to have been dictated by God. It is so amazing. I didn't want to be too snarky because I'm the host. It'd say something like, did he have to say, and then it came to pass 473 times? I mean, didn't they have thesauruses back then? Like, find another way to say it. Anyway. And, it's kind of, all right. And, revelation, the importance of revelation. All right, I get that. People who get revelations, they hear the voice of God in their head. So let me get this straight. Joseph Smith is happily married, loves his wife, and he's seeing another woman. How do you justify this? He feels guilty about this. He got a revelation from God. Celestial marriage. Really? And she believed this? The wife? And, oh, come on. It's like, I know, I sense a little snarky. But then the state of Utah wants to become a state in the union, and the federal government says, you can't have that polygamy thing. They got another revelation from God. All right, I've been thinking about it. I think the polygamy thing was a wrong idea. We're going back to monogamy. Oh, okay. Blacks were not allowed to be ministers in the Church of Mormon until the late 70s, early 80s, when God had his heartstrings pulled by the civil rights movement, apparently, and decided that, hey, maybe blacks should have the right to... All right, come on. This is all so obviously socially constructed. I have read the Bible. But I don't see it any more rapturously or special than any of the other holy books that The people who adhere to those swear this is the most amazing thing, changed their life and so on. All right. How do you know? So if you're an anthropologist from Mars and you come down and go, okay, I'm going to study the world's religions, which is the right one? I'm pretty sure they're going to go, okay, there's no right one. This group believes this one. It's not like there's Indian physics and English physics and African physics. There's just physics. But it's not like that with religion. So in my opinion, religion is in a different epistemological box than empirical claims that could be tested, and we can look at the evidence and you can see it and I can see it, we can agree or disagree. I think religion is something different. It's a different kind of truth, no less valuable in the same way that literary truths are valuable. Great novels are great because they speak to inner truths about human nature, about relationships and love and jealousy and violence and truth-telling and honesty and all the attributes of human nature. But like with the Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky, were there really 4 brothers Karamazov in late 19th century Russia? What are you talking about? This is a novel. He just made this up. It's not whether it's true or not. You might as well ask, was there really a middle land in J.R. Tolkien's trilogy, Lord of the Rings? What do you mean it was it's a novel. You're missing the point of the story, right? All right, so last point on this, back to the resurrection. I don't think the right way to think about the resurrection is an empirical truth thing. I think it's a literary truth. It's a mythic truth. It holds meaning and value in its own right for other reasons. If you have to be convinced that the evidence is overwhelming or else I wouldn't believe it, I think you're missing the point of the story. Like the Jonah swallowed by a great fish, or was it a whale? What was it? Did it really happen? You're asking the wrong question. You're missing the point of the story by insisting it has to be true and this is what we're going to focus on. All right, literary truths and mythic truths carry different meaning than empirical truths. And I think it's better to separate them. Anyway, that's what I think.
Dr. Zweerink, please respond to this quote, excuse me, from the ancient Roman historian and philosopher Lucretius, who wrote, quote, "Had God designed this world, it would not be a world so frail and faulty as we see."
Frail and faulty. I think my response to that is, you doing movie references or stuff. There was an episode of Star Trek I saw again. I've seen it a few times, but there is this, in the episode, there's a being on this planet who has, his wife is there. And so they find the wife and, various things try and chase them off. But the plot line is this fellow, there's actually only one being, and it's the guy, and he's this kind of omnipotent, omniscient being who had fallen in love with a human woman. She'd gone off to battle, died in battle, and when he found her crippled body, he, in his moment of anger, killed off the entire species of this group. And as he was revealing this to Captain Picard, I don't know whether this is good or bad, but I like The Next Generation better than the original series. So, but as he revealed this to Captain Picard, Picard made this observation: we don't have a set of laws capable of judging you. And because this is a being that has powers beyond what you could imagine, knowledge beyond what you could imagine. And as humans, it's like, I just don't have, for me to sit in judgment on God. Now, we can ask the question, is it reasonable to believe God? I think there's lots of things we can do, but to say, okay, if indeed God is who he says he is, then is it proper for me to assess judgment on that, to say, it seems a little ludicrous for me to judge an omnipotent, omniscient being. Now, we can ask the question, is it consistent? Is it logically coherent? Does his omniscience and omnibenevolence align with the suffering we see? I mean, these are great questions to ask, but I don't know that I would argue this world is frail and fragile. And because to answer that question properly, you have to ask the question, what did God create it for? And if this is the only world that is, you might be able to argue that it's frail or fragile. But if this is the world where he's conquering evil or setting it up for a purpose, then you have to ask, does it accomplish that purpose? It's just a different question. And so that seems to be a question where you're taking an external worldview and evaluating Christianity in light of that worldview instead of saying, okay, is Christianity coherent and consistent in that? And I think when you look through Scripture, you can find answers to that. Now, I can ask the question whether I like the answers or don't I, but if it's consistent and coherent, then I don't get to say, well, then this doesn't align with who God is.
Okay, all right. Dr. Shermer, please respond to this quote from the well-known NYU philosopher Thomas Nagel. You're probably familiar with Thomas Nagel. And in his book, The Last Word, Nagel wrote, quote, "I want atheism to be true, and I am made uneasy by the fact that some of the most intelligent and well-informed people I know are religious believers. It isn't just that I don't believe in God, and naturally I hope that I'm right in my belief. It's that I hope there is no God. I don't want there to be a God. I don't want the universe to be like that."
Yeah, I don't agree with that. No, I don't. I mean, either there is or there isn't, and it doesn't matter what I think. If there is a God, and what am I going to say? Look, I used the brain you gave me, so, and I know this guy. I mean, I just can't imagine an all-powerful, all-loving God punishing me for doubting, for using my reason and rationality and my faculties to try to understand truth. Well, what's the point of that? And, so much of these attributes we put to God, he's mad, he's jealous, he's a jealous God. Jealous? I know people that have gotten over jealousy. I mean, come on. What is this like with these Greek gods that get pissed off and throw lightning bolts? I mean, there's no way an omniscient, omnipotent being could be anything remotely like what we're talking about, these adjectives we use. I'm willing to just, let the chips fall where they may. I don't have an opinion about that. In the afterlife, again, I closed my eyes for the last time, like going under general anesthesia, except they don't bring you back out. It's probably something like that. I suspect it doesn't go anywhere. That was one of your 7 questions. Where do we go after we die? Where were you before you were born? You didn't exist. You will just simply cease to exist. That's it. It's like, well, what about the soul or the mind or the whatever? Where does the heartbeat go when you die? It doesn't go anywhere. There's no heartbeat. Where does the digestion go? Does it float off the stomach and into the digestion? No, it just ceases. The mind is just what the brain does. It's just a word to describe what the brain does. When it ceases, the mind just ceases. Just like under general anesthesia, just 3, 2, 1, lights out, that's it. Now, I'm happy to be proven wrong again. It's okay. I'm not worried about it at all. I just can't imagine if there is some afterlife that it's anything remotely like what people have tried to describe in literature, and imagine what it's like. How could you possibly know? We're finite beings living in a 3-dimensional world of stuff made out of, liquid meat. How would we know what a non-corporeal place of some other dimensions would be like? It's not possible. Imagine yourself dead. You can't. Oh, there I am. I'm in the casket, and all my friends are there, and they're really sad. Hopefully, But you're envisioning something. To envision something, you have to be alive, sentient, conscious, and you wouldn't be. So, I just don't see that line of reasoning takes us anywhere. I don't hope the universe. It is just the way it is, whatever it is.
Feuerbach and others like Freud talked about religion being a manifestation of wish fulfillment. We just hope and pray that there's an afterlife and so on. And that explains in their minds religious belief. Isn't this a form of wish fulfillment on the part that Nagel is saying? I don't want there to be a God. I want to be the captain of my soul. I don't want to be accountable to any higher being.
Yeah, I don't think of it that way. I think that's kind of a cheap out. I don't know. Just again, what was the first part? I just had another thought that I lost. Yeah. So
from Nagel's quote, or
yeah, no, just okay. Let's think about
I want atheism to be true.
Right. Excuse me. I just think that we just have to think about these issues. What would it mean to live forever? I don't know. I mean, that's a long time, especially near the end. I mean, just, you live 1 billion years and you're not even remotely close to the end of forever. I mean, these concepts are just so out there. I don't even know what I'm talking about when I use these words. Nobody does. It's like, why is there something rather than nothing? Well, what do you mean by nothing? Do you mean there's no material stuff? Yeah. Okay, what about the space-time that it's in? There's no energy. There's no space and time, no material stuff. But there's also no mind, no consciousness. There's no logic. There's no Platonic concepts. Also, there's no God or gods. Nothing is literally just nothing. And at some point, I don't even know what I'm talking about. There's not even forever because there's no time. It's like, so here again, this epistemological wall we hit, you start thinking about these things and you end up, just having adult beverages late at night going, I have no idea what I'm talking about. It's just crazy, right? We could think these big thoughts and we just hit the wall and then, I don't know. And I don't. Yeah. I mean, just, again, living in this after heaven, what's this like? Christopher Hitchens famously described the Christian heaven as celestial North Korea. You got this all-powerful dictator that knows everything you're thinking. No thanks. That doesn't sound heavenly to me. And then, well, no, it's a loving place. Forever? I mean, the same thing every day, forever? Is there any variety? Are there any challenges? It sounds boring. Okay, I'm just kind of riffing for fun here.
But aren't you smuggling in some assumptions about what it's going to be like there?
I don't know what it's going to be. I have no idea what I'm talking about. And I don't think you do either. Nobody does.
Well, I mean, the distinction I would make, and I agree with you, I don't see how any of us could comprehend what an afterlife is. But again, I look at that as, if Christianity is correct, then the Bible is God's revelation of himself to us. So it's not me trying to imagine what it's like, it's me trying to understand how God has revealed stuff. So it's a different question there.
All right, let's get serious. What do you think is up there? Is it your physical body? Is it just a copy of your connectome and all your memories? What is it, do you think, is there?
As I understand Christian theology, that God has created us as a union of physical and spiritual. So there is a non-corporeal, non-physical component, but I will have some sort of physical body. It's not going to be this physical body. Just by definition, the laws of physics that allow this physical body are different than what's in heaven. But there is going to be some sort of physical.
It's a perfect body that doesn't age.
Yeah.
Okay. But what age are you? How old are you?
I don't know. That hasn't been revealed.
Well, there's a Christian.
And why does age have to be a concern?
Well, because if it's a physical body, I'm just curious. How old am I when I'm there? Because so there is a Christian sect, not yours, but that said 30. The answer is you're 30 years old, because that's just about it's the age Christ was when he was crucified. That's about the time when you're physically super fit and everything is great, and all that. Well, but I'm 69, so what happened to the 39 years of my memories and my life that I had? Does that go with the 30-year-old body? Okay, I can.
But no, I mean that's part of the challenge or the flaw in that thinking, if I would, is that it doesn't say how old we look or whatever. It says we're going to recognize one another, but I would argue that in this world, the physical is a limit on us. And so whatever the physical is there, it's not going to have that limitation. So the idea of, are we going to have belly buttons? It's a question that doesn't have any real relevance there, because the whole point is you're now going to not have this sin nature, which is the rebellion, which is part of the fundamental problem here. The relationships are going to be good. Our relationship with God will be harmonious, peaceful. Our relationships with others will be, and that's what is heaven. It's not the physical, if you will. Although, incidentally, I think given the way Scripture seems to have no limit to what we can investigate, and the physical world has no limit to what we can investigate. I wouldn't be surprised if we're doing some sort of scientific investigation up in heaven as well. Oh. And that would be fun, too.
Yeah, okay. But
help us.
But are your memories of your whole life there? I mean,
I would say yes. That seems to be what Scripture
but how do you know any of this? Because you read it in a book. And what makes you think that book, whose version of the afterlife is quite different from other religious traditions who swear their book gave them the correct interpretation of heaven, how can you tell?
Can we?
Well, my response to that was, that's the question I'm asking is like, is there any confidence I have that the Bible is true?
Yeah.
I can ask the same question. I can go out and survey 100,000 scientists, and I'll get many of them that will say Big Bang cosmology is correct, and I will get some fraction of those scientists that will say the Earth is flat, and some will say this and that. Which version of them? The question isn't, can I find people who will say this? The question is, can I figure out, is there a way to ascertain what's true? And if it's true, then my job is to align myself with it. If we live in a Big Bang universe, I align myself with that. That's the proper response. So if Christianity is true, I want to align myself with it.
What happens if, I don't know, a century from now, it turns out the Big Bang theory wasn't true and it's something else?
Okay.
Would that change your religious beliefs?
No, because my belief in Christianity isn't predicated on the Big Bang. It is predicated. I think the Big Bang, the features of the Big Bang that the Bible describes, that the laws of physics are constant, that there's a beginning to the universe, those are the sorts of things I think are important. But even there, you got devout Christian theologians who hold Scripture in high regard, who those are not always so critical. So I think even in Christianity, there's things that we just don't know that we can talk about, make an argument about, just like we do in science. And it's just going to take a while. Let's wait a while and figure it out. We'll get more data later. So,
okay.
Are we yakking too much?
Well, we'll see, according to the responses. No, some very good points, actually. We do need to transition into questions from the audience, but can each of you take just 1 minute? Is there anything else you would like to say up to this point? Just 1 minute. And I guess we'll start with Dr. Shermer here.
Yeah,
60-second.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you had so many good points here about meaning and purpose and morality. I think all of this can be explained, through natural law, as it were. You're familiar with this, but the laws of nature, evolutionary theory, who we are as a social species explains a lot. Over the course of the last 2 centuries, many of the gaps that used to be closed by the God did it explanation are no longer needed. We've answered a lot of these questions, not all of them. And so I'd say instead of saying God is our answer for this particular mystery, how about just this is what the scientists say now? They might be wrong, and we just don't know. And just leave it at that. I mean, just so much more to say here. Yeah.
Maybe another point.
Yeah, okay, yeah, sure, yeah.
Actually, I would largely agree with a lot of that. In fact, if you read most of my books, I say, here's what I think. Is there life out there or not? I don't know. It's like, you made a comment, God did it is not a good explanation. And I would wholeheartedly agree with that. I think the question of how God did it is often a very fast, even if God did it, the question I would ask is, how did God do that? I mean, did God use some sort of miraculous thing to part the Red Sea, or was that just purely, is there some natural explanation? Did God have humanity, or some sort of creature evolve and put humanity in it? I think these are great questions that, as a Christian, the fact that God did it and my looking for an explanation are not contradictory. They're part of how do we explore and figure out what the truth is. So I'm not sure we disagree so much there.
Okay.
Maybe.
All right.
Yeah, you want to, okay, sorry.
We have quite a number of questions that have come in, so if we can make our responses as succinct as possible. The first one
No more than 5 minutes per?
No more than 26 words. Okay.
Oh, wow, tweets, okay.
Yeah.
All right, the first one comes from Arthur. He's a student here at KSU, and this is directed to Dr. Shermer. Can atheism provide any objective morality?
Okay, where is what's his name?
This is Arthur.
Arthur, where are you? All right. Hi, Arthur. Okay. Atheism isn't anything. I already defined it. It's just doesn't lack a belief in God. That's not a worldview. It's not anything. It's humanism, Enlightenment humanism, or secular humanism, if you will. I prefer Enlightenment humanism. That is, a set of beliefs, tenets, positive assertions about what we believe: civil rights, women's rights, gay rights, animal rights. We believe in equal treatment under the law. We believe in love and relationships and respect for other people, and and so on and so forth. The U.S. Constitution, whatever. Just the kinds of positive assertions about things that have to do with how we should live our lives personally and with other people. That's not atheism. That's humanism. And I contend most people, actually, Christians, Jews, Muslims, and so on, are actually humanists because they agree. I mean, if you're a flag-waving conservative Christian and you believe in the American way of life and so on, you are really a humanist, because that entire program is a secular document. The U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights, all the amendments, and so on and so forth. It doesn't matter what your religion is, or even if you have no religion at all. These are the tenets that we adhere to in America, and we think this is a better way to live than, say, North Korea. So that's it, and it's demonstrably true. Anyway, that's how I answer that question.
That was actually 29 words.
Okay, all right.
I get extra words next time just for that.
Well, the next question is for you, and this comes from Joseph, and he's a student, and actually 3 or 4 questions. David Hume once asked, is God willing to prevent evil but is unable to do so? Then he is not omnipotent. If he is he able but not willing to prevent evil, then he is malevolent. Is he both able and willing, then whence cometh evil? Is he neither able nor willing, then why call him God? What is your response to this question? You want me to read that again?
Well,
that's more than 26 words, actually.
Yeah, if I can have maybe like 28, maybe that would. My response would be, the question is, or to me, the central issue is, if God is who he is, he's sovereign, he's omnipotent, omniscient. There are these things that as Christians have studied Scripture, this is what the nature, the attributes of God are. And so then the question is, how can, if that is who God is, how can you have a world where evil happens? And there's far more theological discussion in this, but to me the central question in there hinges on this question. If God is a God and he's created beings with free will, then that free will carries with it the implication that you can make choices that violate God's will, which is what I would define as evil. And so the question in my mind is there some reason why God would want to create beings with free will? And I think there are good, reasonable answers to that. I think that's part of why this world is temporal, that this is not the final answer. That's this problem of evil doesn't plague heaven, it plagues it here, because people are going to make choices. And in fact, if you look at a lot of the suffering that happens in this world, it's actually a consequence of the choices that people make. And so my answer to that would be, it's not that God can't stop evil, it's not that God doesn't care about evil, it's that God is doing something bigger, that making free will beings, that comes with it, but what he's doing is bigger than that.
Childhood leukemia? What's the point of this? He could stop it if he wants. Why doesn't he?
But I mean, commensurate with that is you want a world that behaves orderly and rationally so that we can do science. There are arenas that God has set up, this arena, and it's not, I mean, there are a lot of consequences to human choices. I would be surprised to find, actually, it wouldn't surprise me to find that a lot of the things that we attribute as natural are actually results of human behavior, that where we just don't live according to the way this world is designed to operate.
All right. Well, this is a little too convenient because believers in prayer are confident that when the prayer, intercessory prayer results in, say, Aunt Mary's cancer going away, God gets the credit. when Aunt Mary's cancer is prayed for and she dies, who gets the blame? Not God. It's a little too convenient. There's no test of this. Does this actually work? Does intercessory prayer actually work? No, it doesn't. It's been tested. And so
that is shifting the question, though, because the question was, why would evil exist in this world? And, we can have a long discussion about prayer and what its function and how we do and what it's supposed to be doing. And I agree with you. I think a lot of times Christians are very quick to say, ooh, God answered my prayer because he gave me the parking space, or Mary's prayer got... Yeah. I think it's simplistic at best to answer it that way. But what would I think we're too quick to discount the wrong choice, the choices that humanity makes in that. I mean, example, why do people die in earthquakes? It's like here you've got, I think it was in Haiti, magnitude 6 some odd earthquake, which is a relatively small earthquake, given what can happen. You got a quarter of a million people die. You've got an earthquake that's 1,000 times stronger hits Japan. Nobody dies from the earthquake, but the tsunami is bigger than expected, and like 10,000 people die. Both of them are tragedies in that people are dying, but the 250,000 are human consequences because we know earthquakes happen. We need to prepare for them. That's part of why living in California so stinking expensive, is because you got to prepare for it, and we don't. We notoriously don't prepare for what's going to happen in this world.
A 1-minute response.
Well, the bubonic plague. Just take any of the horrors. Life is pretty difficult. People, until recently, just masses of people died at very young ages. Nobody could seem to do anything about it, and why would a good God allow all this? This is all just kind of hand waving. Well, he's outside of time and he has a different goal, or it's all going to work out in the end. We'll figure it out. We'll figure what the larger context is or whatever. Yeah, but maybe there's no God and just shit happens. That's just the way it is, because that is the universe. Entropy, the second law, stuff is just running down. Metal rusts and weeds grow and bedrooms get cluttered and bodies get out of shape. That's the normal state of things unless we take action. Poverty is what you get when you do nothing. That's the default position. We don't need any books about the cause of poverty. That's natural. Cause of wealth, that's what we need to figure. Okay, these are all human actions that we can do something about. I don't see the hand of God doing anything either way.
Sorry. I didn't have a chance. Go ahead. You have other questions. So.
Do you want 16 seconds?
Now we can move on. Okay. We can probably argue for all night about any one of these questions.
Well, the next question is for you. And this comes from Rajan or Rajan, who is in absentia.
All right.
Oddly enough.
I'm just shy.
And he is a student. And his question is, what gives the Bible credibility?
That's not for me, is it?
No,
okay, that's your question there, Mike. I think what gives the Bible credibility is that it accurately describes what we see in this creation. Christians like to argue about Genesis 1 about are these days 24 hours or not, but that just totally misses the point. That's a peripheral issue to who is God. He's this powerful God who sustains the world, who's created as orderly, purposeful, sustains the world so that his immutable character is part of how the world works and why it's so reliable and orderly and regular that science works. That you look at how it described the early earth, and lo and behold, that's what science says how the early earth works. You look at how humans behave, and you think we're encountering new things, but you read through Scripture and you find the way humans behave in there. And it just aligns, historically I find that aligns. There's places where we don't have evidence, so we can't evaluate that, but where I see what Scripture describes, it matches not just the way the world works but how humans work and how animals work and how we relate and how that works best. My contention would be, and I agree, I love the descriptions in your book about how the world works and what we can draw out and find as these are the principles of how life would work best, because very often those align with scriptural principles. Jesus was asked, what's the greatest commandment? Love your God with your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. As we do that, people thrive and flourish.
Okay. The next question is for Dr. Shermer. This comes from Alexander. Are the natural or modern empirical sciences the ultimate epistemic arbiters of all human knowledge? If so, which modern empirical science validates this position?
Good. Very good question. It's not just the word science. I would say all of philosophy and science, anything that employs reason, rationality, and empiricism, all the tools we have to get at the truth is all we have. That's all any of us have available to us. It's not perfect, but it's the best system we have. And it's taken centuries to develop, and it's made remarkable progress because it works. To ask, can you use science? I think that's what's behind this. Can you use science to prove science? This is what Thomas Nagel calls one thought too many in that book you quoted. This is like saying, you know, can you use rationality to prove rationality? It's not a thing. Like it's just a tool. You just use it. If it works, use it. If it doesn't, don't. And so, you know, for example, I wouldn't say when we're studying morality, you know, what should we do? What's right and wrong? We didn't get into that, but well, you're not going to go to the ichthyologist to figure this out. The geologist isn't going to be the person I consult. You know, I'm going to go to the philosophers that study ethics and the psychologists that study moral behavior and so on, and see if what we can learn from all the different sciences that touch on moral questions, something like that. So I would say it's just a body of knowledge and different fields, and we just try to see if we get a convergence of evidence to toward some kind of conclusion that we can say is provisionally true in that Bayesian way. Could be wrong, but for now, this is what we think, you know, is the right thing to do. Something like that. You know, there's this accusation, scientism. You know, you're claiming science explains everything. You're like, love. You know, love doesn't need science. You know, well. You know what you call love without evidence? Stalking. Come on, that's funny. Stalking, you know, okay. Anyway, it's not my joke, it's Tim Minchin's joke, it's a funny line. But even that, I mean, right. You don't want to be stalked. If you're giving off evidence, then, you know, okay, forget it. So yeah, let's just use the tools we have.
Oh. Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So if I get your position, science, there's not an absolute objectiveness to it, but it's a very effective tool at helping us understand what we think is the truth.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, okay, so we make a distinction between objective truths, like, you know, there's 212 people here today. Well, we can find out the answer. We just count them up. Mm-hmm. Right? And then there's subjective truths. You know, like I think dark chocolate is better than milk chocolate. Now, I happen to think that's an objective truth. That's really true. But, you know, people disagree with me. That's internal. That's just a subjective preference, right? Then there's like in between that. You know, so like the example I use is, you know, meditation works for me. Well, it doesn't work for me, but, you know, people say that. That's an internal subjective statement about what's true for them. But what people that are into meditation, what they're arguing these days is it really works. I mean, it'll work for all of you if you do, you know, 20 minutes a day, 6 days a week. At this time, and you do this and that, it'll reduce your stress levels by 20%, whatever. That's what how do you go from internal subjective to external truths? And that's how you do it. So science is involved in those kinds of questions, you know, just trying to figure out what the cause is by changing the variables to see what the effects are. And, you know, that's...
So if I could, I found your point about universal human truths, or I'll let you field that, but one of the questions I have is like, you know, if science is the arbiter of what is, and, you know, kind of the final arbiter, the only arbiter, there's a lot of history that says, you know, kind of the strongest rule, and you know, it's kind of how do you get out of utilitarianism? You know, the Marvel where we'll kill off these people because everybody else will be better. I thought you had an intriguing thing, so it's kind of an opportunity for you to articulate that a little.
I see where you're going. Yeah, well, obviously, when I use the word provisional, I mean it's temporary for now. This is what we think. It could change. Like I said, the Big Bang, maybe this is wrong, probably not, but you know, who knows? You know, so things that are culturally bound and pushed in a certain direction. Eugenics is the example of this. You know, everybody was into a century ago. By the way, this was a liberal, left-wing cause, eugenics. You know, we're going to breed the bad people out of our population. And, you know, at the Nuremberg trials, the Nazis cited the state of California and the state of Virginia and their laws about sterilizing feeble-minded people in America. And we did. Tens of thousands of American citizens protected by the US Constitution were sterilized without their consent. That happened here. Yeah, all right, so is this science-based? Well, no, I'd say this is political and ideological, not science. Science is the tool that they use to implement their political regime. I mean, the Nazi regime was not, it was mechanical in its murder, in part, but its ideology was blood and soil, 19th century romanticism, anti-Enlightenment values. You know, it was the group over the individual. Enlightenment values are the individuals the primary target of our moral concern. Can the individuals suffer? The individuals vote, not groups, and so on.
But you have implied at times that natural moral law is tantamount to being an absolute.
As close as we can get, yes. Okay, so here's the reason I go down this road a bit, because I'm not a relativist, and I don't want it to be, again, a light switch. There's either objective moral truths, and it's God outside the whole system that validates that, which is already a flawed argument anyway, because Plato debunked this 2,500 years ago. You know, is God embracing or telling us what the moral values, correct, right, and wrong are because they really are that way? Or does it just depend on what he says? Because if they really are that way, why not just give us the reasons for why these are right and wrong and just skip the middleman? What do we need that for? And that's what we've been doing ever since. So, but the opposite of that, you know, then anything goes. No, not anything goes. It's not moral relativism. You know, some things are really wrong. Some cultures are really better than other cultures. Really, objectively, measurably better and worse. Absolutely. I don't know how political you want to get, but, I could give examples. Mm-hmm.
All right.
So if I could, I just, you implied that Plato debunked the idea that God's moral. I would say there's a good response to that it's not that God is aligning himself with some external standard, which would be one option, or God is just arbitrarily choosing what they are. But, you know, as Christians, as I understood it, it's like they're arguing that these flow out of God's character. So God's character is the definition of what those are. So it's not arbitrary, but God's not aligning himself with theirs. So there's it's not that Plato has debunked that. Plato raised an objection that I think has been answered, but that's probably a little more technical than we want to talk about here. So,
this next question is for either of you. Perhaps Dr. Zweerink first. This comes from Walker, who's a student here. Walker, would you like? Okay. And his question is: many atheists claim amphibious animals like the lungfish are evidence of the evolutionary process. How do you explain these creatures' existence from a creationist point of view?
So, great idea to ask an astrophysicist about biology, but I have the benefit of working with a biochemist, so I have thought about these sorts of things. And the basic answer I would have is that the way creatures are constructed, there are body plans, and those body plans have things the way they are. And so God is often creating things with the body plans. And so the idea that there are places or creatures that can live in certain environments, the question is, are they transitional forms, or are they creatures that were adapted to their environment? And I would argue that there are creatures that were well adapted to their environment, not transitional forms. And so it's a question that's hard. I think it's hard to get exact data because that all requires timing and everything. Sorry, I'm not saying that well. You can interpret that piece of data of a lungfish has both lungs and gills and ask the question, is that explained best through an evolutionary where it's a transitional form, or is it best explained through a creationist worldview where that is a creature that God created and adapted to its environment, and in and of itself, that's not, that single piece isn't going to be there. You got to look at the broader body of evidence. It's probably one of the big places where Michael and I would disagree, that he would look at that and see, yes, that's the best example, or that's the body of evidence points to an evolutionary perspective. I've got kind of a little harder position to defend that I would argue that that's a common design perspective. But you're now kind of getting to the limit of my biological knowledge to address your question. But that's kind of, to me, the central part of that question is, does that piece, it's not an arbiter between the two, but can you explain it well in either, and which one has the best set of evidence for it? So,
I mean, part of this is just this idea of a transitional fossil or organism. It implies some hindsight. You're looking back. You know, you could say, well, maybe we today are a transitional species between Homo sapiens and AI blending with the brain, like Elon wants to do with his Neuralink company, you know, something like that. But that's only after the fact. You go, oh, I see, they were on their way to, you know, but the problem is in evolutionary theory, nobody's on their way to becoming anything. Species are just well adapted for doing what they're doing right here, right now. There's no teleology, there's no goal direction to evolution. It's not striving to become something. I'm trying to get taller, I'm trying to get, you know, bigger teeth or bigger brains. Nobody's doing anything. They're just, most organisms do just fine with tiny little brains. There's nothing special about intelligence. We think it is because, you know, we're us, we're cool. But, you know, most organisms to have tiny little brains, they do just fine. You know, so, and the other thing about the creationist thing, I'll give you an example when I used to debate these guys. So they'd say, okay, here's a fossil, and here's a fossil. You know, show me just one transitional fossil in between there. And I would give an example, you know, and go like here's one transitional fossil. Oh, now there's 2 gaps in the fossil record. Give me 2 more transitional fossils, and then, and so on and so on. You see the flaw in the logic of even asking the question that way. Okay.
All right. Next is a question from Amanda. She's a student here. And her question is to Dr. Zweerink. And it is, I think it's extremely pessimistic that people who don't follow Christianity are going to hell. What does it matter? What does it matter to follow Christianity, I guess? Why do my choices have an impact on my afterlife? We don't know what's beyond, so why scare people and threaten them with eternal punishment?
I agree. You don't threaten people and scare them with eternal punishment. The reason why I want Michael to become a Christian is not because he's a threat, not because he has ideas that I don't like. It's that if Christianity is true, there are 2 options. You are in heaven with God, and that is, God's presence is the fulfillment of goodness, or you're separated from God, and that is hell. And so it's not that I want to scare him into that, it's that I think that's the best thing for him. And so I want to articulate that position, and I want him to want that. I have to say it bothers me that Christians try and scare people into hell. I think that's just, it's counterproductive. If Christianity's truth rested on the behavior of all Christians, it would be a sad evaluation. That's why if atheist truth was predicated on their actions, the same thing. Nobody lives consistently with everything they say. I don't want to scare you into hell, but if that's the truth, I want you to know so that you make a choice.
What happens to Jews? They don't accept Jesus as their Savior, except for the Jews for Jesus group, which is pretty small. What happens to the Jews?
So I would say 2 things. One, it is impossible for me to know, for me to make an evaluation of any of that. So ultimately, the arbiter of that is going to be God. He is not limited by my knowledge. He would have all knowledge of that. But at the end of the day, you know, I'm curious how you would respond, but my response to why do you and I look at the same evidence and come to different conclusions, I think a major component of that is that I want Christianity to be true and you don't. Now, I'm imposing, you know, if you'll bear with me on, I don't know your mind, you haven't told me this, but I think a major stumbling blocks to people becoming Christian is that part of that becoming a Christian is submitting yourself to God's command, or God's rule, God's authority, God's sovereignty. And if autonomy is the final say of the day, that is a big choice to make. And so when all is settled and done, God knows the people who want to submit to him and those who don't. And so I can't say I have talk about political correctness, it's not a popular thing to say, but that is what Christianity says, so.
Yep.
Okay. All right, the next question is comes from Chuck, and this is for Dr. Shermer. You said that the God question is unknowable. Now, Robert P. George, do you know him? Robert George, he is a professor of, he's a legal professor at Princeton University, okay? Robert George and others define knowing as having three components: experience, data, and judgment. What part of knowing is missing for you to know the answer to the God question? Experience, data, judgment.
Yeah, I would say data. You know, most of the arguments for God's existence, you know, the prime mover, the first cause, the fine-tuning, design, and so forth, why is there something rather than nothing? These are largely what are called God of the gaps arguments. You know, this is the mystery. I can't explain it. What is your explanation? And if I don't have one, well, then we default to the God explanation. Why? There might be other explanations we just haven't thought of. You know, so I kind of reject that outright. And I could be wrong about the unknowable part. You know, again, I apply that also to consciousness, you know, what it's like to be something. This is called the hard problem of consciousness. The easy problem, so-called easy problem of consciousness, is figuring out how the brain works, which is a hard problem, actually. But, you know, figuring out how the neural networks operate to see faces in the fusiform gyrus of your temporal lobe here. When there's a stroke there, you can't see a face, and so on. We, you know, kind of figure that out, where red appears in the occipital lobe of your brain. But the hard problem is asking a conceptually, in my opinion, problematic question. What's it like to be the wiring itself? What's it like to be a bat? How the hell would I know? I'm not a bat or a dog or you. It's not possible to know that, because it implies that somehow my little homunculus can like transport out of my skull into the bat's brain and go, oh, this is what it's like to be a bat, as if it's still a human inside the bat brain going, oh, I see. Or little mini me inside me goes inside your skull and go, oh, Jeff's red looks like my red. Okay. This is a misconceived thought experiment. It's not possible. So I think that's one of these unknowable ones. And again, we're just lacking, not just data, it's conceptually problematic as a question, I think.
Okay. The next question comes from, again, Rahan, is it? Or Rajan, a student, and this is for Dr. Zweerink. What gives Christianity merit over all other religions?
That's a really good question, and I will say I have not investigated other religions nearly as much as I have Christianity, and so, you know, kind of to Michael's point, I have to have a little bit of caution or reserve about making a statement. But as I have investigated Christianity, there's a lot of places where what Christianity says and how the world works aligns. To the extent I've investigated other religions, they get part of that correct, but they just don't as much. And I think there's a fair part of me that argues one of the biggest pieces that particularly is relevant to me is I love understanding how this world works. And if you ask the question, what kind of world needs to be true? What are the philosophical underpinnings of science? Christianity provides, to my study so far, Christianity is the only worldview that provides the underpinnings, the philosophical underpinnings that science needs to work. So it doesn't mean you have to think Christianity is true to be a scientist, but it does mean when you're doing science, you're acting like the Christian description of the world is correct. And so I think that's a place that says Christianity is something definitely worth considering as to where it's true. And you know, I can't say I've gone out and investigated all the other religions, but I do know Christianity provides a really good set of explanations for how the world works.
This, again, is a multi-part question. It comes from Alexander, who's not a student here. This is directed to you. And the question is, which part of, quote, meaning, purpose, order, or design are empirically observable, measurable? Can you put a, quote, design on a lab bench to study? Does one infer the existence of, quote, design the same way, say, via physics or any natural science, on, does one infer the existence of design the same way one infers the existence of a neutrino? If not, then how? The Bible?
So if you're going to talk about design, one of the things that I've come to appreciate just from practical experience is you got to ask, what is it doing? What is it trying to do? Or what is the design for? So just, I don't think there's a generic design you can measure. I think, you know, I've done enough work around my house, you know, getting in the wiring, and it's like, why is this here? This doesn't make any sense. This is poorly designed, only to find out later it was doing something I wasn't aware of, and it's like, oh, that does that well. And then you ask the question, okay, not only does it do it well, but are there other ways? So is this just kind of run-of-the-mill, oh yeah, what I would expect to be there, or is it unusual? And when you start asking those questions, you know, among the things that life requires is you got to have some element like carbon. Carbon is not a run-of-the-mill element. Its ability for chemical reactivity is incredibly unusual to all other elements of the periodic table. You've got to have some sort of solvent like water. Water, again, is not some sort of normal molecule. It is incredible in its capacity to absorb things, heat capacity, all sorts of characteristics about it that make it remarkable and unusual. And so when so all of life is predicated on carbon chemistry operating in an aqueous solution. And then you ask the question, okay, you look at the periodic table and we know how elements are produced in the universe. You've got hydrogen and then helium and lithium and beryllium and boron and carbon. No, I'm nuts. Boron, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, fluorine, and neon.
Nice. No, I can't.
What's interesting is that the way those elements are produced is that early in the universe, two proton, neutron comes together, they make the next one, and you build it up one by one. And so you would naively expect the elements to be built up that way. And it turns out, if you ask the question, what are the most abundant elements in the universe? It's hydrogen. No surprise there, simplest one. Helium, no surprise there, because that's the next element up there. The next one's carbon. And the next one's oxygen. So three of the four elements, or three of the four most abundant elements in the universe are the ones that are incredibly necessary for life. So is that, I've measured it and quantified it and said, you know, in part no, because I don't know what other universes might be possible, but I can say this universe seems to be designed to produce the elements that life requires. And it's not just that, well, whatever's there, life came about in there. It's like, these are things that are incredibly unique. Just as an example of how unique, have you ever made an egg? You're adding heat to that. You think there's a chemical transition going on there, a chemical change. It turns out carbon is just so complex in the molecules it can form. All it does is just change the folding of the molecule. But eating a raw egg and eating a hard-boiled egg are two very different experiences. So I would love to say, here's the formula for finding design. No, I can tell you, here's the formula for finding neutrinos. But when we look at things, there's just a lot of things that we find like that, if the universe is designed for life, we see a lot of things fall into place in rather unique ways or unexpected ways so that life can be here.
All right. We're coming down to the end here, and here's a question for Dr. Shermer. What is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow?
67.8 6.3 miles an hour. At, oh, sorry. That's 73 miles.
The African or European swallow. I'm sorry. I think I interjected that question.
At least he didn't go flying off into the abyss, though. I mean, that was nice.
What's your favorite color? Yes. All right. For the last question here, this comes from Joe, and this is for Dr. Shermer. Without God's laws of justice, how do you punish or define evil? Is it only the next generation that can judge the decisions of the previous generation?
Well, I sort of answered this before. Whether there's a cosmic courthouse where this all gets settled in some distant future, and Mengele and Eichmann, Heydrich, Hitler, they're all in the dock. I don't care. I mean, that's not the world we live in. We need the Nuremberg trials now. That's why we have The Hague. Put these people in the dock now. That's where justice is served, in the here and now. Whether Hitler got away with it, these are just hypothetical questions that don't do much for me. Because I doubt that there's a cosmic courthouse where this all gets settled, everything is made whole again. Probably not. If so, okay. I don't know what that would look like. Let me make just one more comment on the fine-tuning thing. The argument goes something like this, because it's important to address this, that design things have a designer behind them, the watchmaker argument, right? So, if I show you, say, my watch, and it's not likely this would have come about by chance. There's a designer. I know, I can go to the company and see them making it. All right, so the universe is like the watch. Where do I go to see the universe maker? In other words, the analogy doesn't hold. These are things in the universe itself that must have a cause or a design, or it's just random. Maybe say the Jesus in the face of Jesus in the tortilla, or the Virgin Mary in the grilled cheese sandwich. These are random. Everybody knows these funny examples. But you would not say the same thing with the four presidents' heads at Mount Rushmore. Those are clearly not the result of random erosion. So we can see the difference, but these are parts of the universe. So there's a category error in saying the entire universe has to have a designer. No, that's a different category of something that is the whole thing versus the parts in it. Anyway, that's kind of how I address that.
I would argue you can go see the maker in the afterlife.
Well, maybe. As I said, if it turns out there's an afterlife and I wake up and I go, oh no, God, all right, it's just a little joke.
We'll finish up with just 2-minute responses from each of you. Dr. Zweerink, is there anything in particular you wish had come up this evening that you would like to address in 2 minutes or 131 words?
I think we covered a lot of ground. One thing I don't think came up explicitly that I would like to point out explicitly is, we've had talking back here, talking at dinner, enjoy hanging out and talking with you. Obviously, we have vastly different opinions on things, vastly different thoughts on things, and yet we're doing something that is not very common in today's culture, is disagreeing and not being obnoxious towards one another.
Yeah, no cancel culture.
And even in the midst of saying some what would be considered controversial things, so I think it's really important for people to be able to evaluate ideas. And if you really do take to heart that you look through the way somebody looks and how they say to get at what they're saying, one, you're going to be really irritated with the most of public dialogue. But two, we're going to get to where we're evaluating ideas on the idea's merit, which is kind of the heart of what science is about. And one of the things that I love about science is that it isn't, are you black, are you white, are you tall, are you short, smart, dumb, whatever nationality. None of that matters. By and large, what matters is, does your idea work? And does it true? And does it work? It means, does it correspond to the way the world works? That there's this arbiter of what are true statements and what aren't. And if Michael and I can have this vehemently different worldview and yet still engage well, let's do that, because we're going to make a lot more progress in solving some of the problems. In fact, we're going to find that our solutions are probably going to look a lot alike in some places. So
that sounds good to me. I mean, this matter of God's existence, this used to be a really controversial subject. I mean, pretty heated, and people were very animated about it. I find this is not that bad anymore. I mean, I think people have come to grips with talking about it, and they're a lot more accepting. By contrast, if you wanted to ask, what's a woman? Oh boy. Okay, all right, now we're, okay. I'm telling you, the God question is kind of, okay. There's these other set of things that people are very animated about. And in the academy, they've just lost their minds completely. I mean, this is just left-wing authoritarianism, and there is no search for truth. They know the truth. Okay, this is bad. This is very bad for the future of learning. And anyway, that's a little. So I guess I would just say, add to this, you know, that we have made a lot of progress over the centuries, and you know, just who knows in 500 years from now what we will then think is, look back at us and go, oh my God, look what those people in the 21st century, can you believe it? Like we look back at the witch crazes, and they were burning women at the stake to save their souls because of the fire, what? Or slavery. You know, I mean, if you read the arguments in support of slavery before, say, 1860, you know, pretty much everybody just accepted it. You know, all Christians, almost everybody. You know, just a handful of people were willing to stand up against it. And now nobody tries to justify it. It's illegal in every country in the world. So, you know, we make real progress, not as rapidly as we'd like, but it happens just incrementally enough. My thing is, don't aim for utopia, because there's no such place. It's literally what the word means, no place. Protopia. Just try to make tomorrow a little bit better than today, just slightly. Just do one little thing.